Brennan, he was originally a communist. He was an actual communist, and we allowed him to take over one of our largest intel agencies.
What I wanted to start with is, I mean, to me, this is the biggest news because I love it, but I want to hear your take. And we won't read the article, but out of the New York Times, the administration takes steps to target two officials who investigated Trump. It's unclear whether moves targeting the former FBI director James Comey and former CIA director John Brennan will lead to charges. What's your take?
I think you know how I feel about that. I don't think there's ever going to be charges, but I am heartened that they are looking into the malfeasance or the alleged malfeasance of Brennan and Comey. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I think exposing some of the things that they did in the background, whether or not it leads to prosecutions, I would be happy that if they both were prosecuted for the things that they did, the violations of the Constitution, the violations of public trust, violations of the law. I think it'd be an easy investigation to work as an FBI agent in real time when things are going on. But now we've got so much time passed from the activities that took place. What often happens is you will see things from the past, these activities happen. Because the statute of limitations has worn off, you won't see a lot of push from the Department of Justice or anybody or the FBI to look into it because there's really not going to be any fruits of that labor. I like this in the transparency that they're going to have in exposing this information. It's a little different. I know we're going to talk in a little while about the Epstein stuff, and I've got some ideas of why I think, number one, people are disappointed. And number two, why there's some information you probably will never see. And it's not because somebody's covering up. At least that's what's my theory. But with Brennan, he was originally a communist. He was an actual communist. And we allowed him to take over one of our largest intel agencies. And with Comey, I didn't care for him when I worked for him when he was director, didn't care for him when I met him in person. He's pretty much what you see on TV. He's this arrogant, buffoonish type guy.
I think probably with a healthy smattering of cowardice, maybe is my guess. But I think he let his wife take the fall for that 86-47 on the beach. That was my take.
I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I don't think it's cowardice. I think he just looks at trying to make a splash. He wants people to think that he's I don't know, somebody they should pay attention to, but not in the same ways that you see some of the other dysfunctional, I would call retired FBI agents, some of them that you see on CNN, like Frank Figliuzzi or Andy McCabe, any of those individuals that want people to actually respect their opinion because they think that they want people to think that they know what they're talking about. I don't think I've ever heard a cogent thought come out of Comey's mouth positing anything since he retired.
You wonder how he gets to the top. I'm looking at a list of names here, and this is a list of the 113th Senate confirmation vote for Brennan. And I hadn't thought about this in a really long time, but I'm looking at a very long list of Republicans here that voted yay for this guy. How does something like that happen? Did this come up? I wasn't really following it.
Well, I think it's several things play into that. A lot of it has to do with citizens not holding their representatives accountable. Number two has to do with our representatives not taking the time to speak with their constituents on how they feel on certain measures. And number three, they're usually answering to donors, people that put money in the coffers, people that put money into the PACs, hire people that are friendly to them. It's a transition I've seen with my own senators here down in Mississippi that, when they're running for office initially, they're out trying to shake every hand and kiss every baby. Once they get in, you rarely see them again in a public setting. I haven't seen Roger Wicker. I haven't seen him in a public setting since I asked him a question in a public setting in November of 2022. And I've done my research here. I haven't found anybody that's even asked him a question from the citizenry. So I think that plays a bit into it. They're really good at kind of parroting our concerns. You'll see them on Fox News. You'll see them on CNN complaining about stuff, some of the same things that we complain about. And then you'll see them putting on some theater before a hearing. There was probably some rough questions for Brennan. But in the end, what do they say? What do we always hear from people like Mitch McConnell? Well, the president gets to make his nominations. We should really just. But right now, we don't have a lot of people asking John Thune about what's the holdup on the federal judicial nominations. You got people in the House taking victory laps on Trump's big, beautiful bill. I will note, and I think you actually reposted it. One of the things I noticed from the big, beautiful bill, almost everything that was in it is something that the Congress could have put forward or acted on the 4 years that Trump wasn't in office. So I'm going to be out there when they're on the campaign trail trying to take credit for Donald Trump's successes. What were you doing the last 4 years?
Yeah. You know what I think they were doing? I'm super cynical about this. I think they were working together to write all of the pork for this reconciliation bill. That's what Republicans were doing behind closed doors for the last 4 years. Oh, eventually we'll get into power, and here's all the favors I owe you. Here's all the favors you owe me. And then we'll slap a veneer of like executive orders codifying on the top of that. Maybe it's not, but what you said, I think I've been trying to form a unified theory of the Republican Party. And it's not controlled opposition. That's not the right thing to say, I think. And you made a really good point. My impression was that actually a lot of these people are kind of trying to be the elected representative that represents their constituents. They just do a really bad job at it. And I thought, well, now, you said you're right. They don't really interact with the people. Maybe they go to a parade, they might have 2 town halls or something. But my impression was that those people really don't have their finger on the pulse of America and understand the level of anger.
Plus, how many of them are actually malleable and controlled by others? It even happens in the state, in the state party level. My state representative here, he's a nice guy, lives in the neighborhood, lives just down the road from me. I don't really have a huge problem with him, but he was someone that was selected in this new district, selected by the establishment Republican Party here, put into that position, and he voted antithetical to the way I think a lot of people in his district wanted him to vote. And I texted him. He's approachable. I said, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you voting for this? I haven't talked to one person in our neighborhood, much less around town, that wanted this kind of vote." He said, "Well, I just voted the way that the leadership wanted me to vote." And I'm like, "What? You don't work for the leadership. You need to talk to us. You need to spend time with us." He has since then started asking opinions, and he'll text me back and forth. "Hey, here's where this legislation is." But we definitely don't get that from our federal representatives. You talked about town halls. The word town hall here in Mississippi, it's a foreign language. It just doesn't happen. Cindy Hyde-Smith, Roger Wicker, Michael Guest, they don't do town hall. They'll show up at some luncheons and stuff and then look terrified when they see me in the back of the room with my hand raised to ask a question. But other than
donor
that,
dinners too, I bet,
I really don't have any interaction with them.
Yeah, they go to donor dinners. I can tell you that they're not looking at polling either. They don't care about the polls. I've had 2 Republican legislators reach out to me in the last 4 years, 2. And it was for things they didn't even use. They didn't even take the data I gave them. I want to bring it back to the investigation because I was looking at the article and it didn't have a lot of information. I'm not sure what the source was, but it said that FBI and CIA officials declined to comment. And a Justice Department spokeswoman wrote in a statement that it didn't comment on ongoing investigations. So there is an investigation. Do you think it's new? And what do you think? Like, who's running it? How's it being run? Like, I know you don't know the detail, but conjecture, how's it being run? What's the end game here? What's their goal of doing this? Is it to put out some document?
At a minimum, I hope it's transparency of putting the information out there so the citizens can make their own informed decisions. I put more trust in citizens than I do anybody else. I definitely put more trust in the citizens than I do our elected representatives. And I even more so put more trust in the citizens than I do a couple of these large follower podcasters with their conspiracy theories that have no idea. They're just looking for confirmation bias. What I think is happening is, Trump made promises on the campaign trail that we're going to look into these things, and he's fulfilling that promise. I think it's something that probably came up in a meeting where he said, "Hey, I want to know what happened." I would if I was the president. It's
Yeah.
It's not going to be my top priority. I think Trump is really good at staying disciplined in the things that he does, which is what makes him such a success. And I've got one of my best friends as a builder, and I can tell you, if you're not organized, prioritized, and staying on task, you're going to get behind. And it's going to overwhelm you. I think Trump is
Yeah.
really good at that. I think that he probably at some point said, when are we going to get some answers about this? Why were these guys doing what they were doing? It was a collusion. Russian collusion was a hoax. There were those of us on the inside of the FBI that picked up on that pretty early, but there really wasn't anything we could do about it. I'm standing in the fitness center in the FBI office in Jackson when Comey made his famous January 5th, 2016 speech about Hillary Clinton. And I said at that point, he should be fired immediately. He has stepped outside of his authority. The same thing with what happened on the Russia collusion stuff when Kevin Kleinsmith falsified information in an affidavit for a FISA. That should put him in prison. I can tell you as an FBI agent, I would have lost my job immediately, my clearance, and likely been put in prison for what he did for tampering and falsifying evidence. And FISA's that's a whole different deal from writing an affidavit for a criminal search warrant or a criminal arrest warrant. When you're writing those, you may have multiple informants, multiple sources, as we call them, that one or two of those, their information may not be 100% verifiable, but the others are. In a FISA, it's much more strict. There's a thing called a Woods file. And if anything cannot be proven truthful, and you have to put it in that Woods file, this is how I know this sentence in this affidavit for this FISA, then the whole thing's bad. So when Kleinsmith did that, he tainted the whole thing, but they allowed this to go forward on false information. And I'm sorry, the consequences weren't where they should be. Not in my opinion. That he got like 6 months suspension as an attorney, lost his law license for 6 months. He did get let go from a government position, fell into a high profile, highly paid position. He should have gone to prison. I mean, it is a federal offense what he did.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of that where I know like people, as you know, like to throw around the word treason really easily. But the way I look at it is if you don't hold people accountable, what you just explained is that one of our most critical controls over American civil liberties can basically be gun decked and there's no recourse for the American people. And so if that's the case, well, like what about our strategic launch programs? What about the decision-making process that we use for, I mean, any of these things, right? It's reasonable for the people to look and say, wow, our elected officials and their nominated heads of these departments did this. They literally came together and did this. And so what's the recourse? And I know it's like, okay, it's been a while. We're going to get some answers, but I don't know if answers is enough to correct it.
I don't think answers, the answers that they're going to provide are going to be something that's going to quell the individual curiosity. Bill Shipley, shipwreck crew on X, he said something. I told him I was going to steal it and use it when I was on Chris Salcedo's show on Monday with Chad Prather as the other person in the panel. The citizen's curiosity does not overrule basically the DOJ process. There is a legal process to it with the things that they do. We have our elected representatives for a reason, and I've said this, and I can't stress this enough. There's nothing that the FBI does that cannot be briefed to our elected representatives, even the Democrat ones that are likely going to leak it. But if you're going to brief them, if you're reticent to brief them because you're worried about them leaking information, then you need to explain the consequences of them leaking that information and then hold them accountable for it. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Pat Leahy, look how long he stayed in as a representative, and he lost his security clearance for leaking classified information from the Intelligence Committee, but he still stuck around. There was no consequences to that. We've got people that were, inside the FBI and other intelligence agencies that went to prison for stuff like that, but we don't hold our representatives accountable. I still don't think that overrides the Constitution and the fact that our representatives should be able to be briefed on everything that the government is doing. It doesn't mean that you get to go down to an ICE facility and assault some officers and try to force your way in. You still do it properly through the process. You don't necessarily have to subpoena people to come in and do it. I can tell you when Louis Freeh was there, if they just called and asked him, he would meet with them and give them the information they're looking for. Cash seems to be doing that right now. He's providing responses ahead of time, and he's providing responses to things that the last administration asked for. I'm hoping with this Brennan and Comey investigation, we get as much sunlight on it as possible. I think that both of them have committed some I don't want to say treasonous, but have definitely violated the Constitution, and there should be some consequences to it. And if that consequence means that they become toxic and they can't be hired anywhere and they can't monetize their prior position, okay, if that's the best we're going to get, that's the best we're going to get. I don't want to see either one of them sitting on TV with anybody. I don't even want to see, local Action 7 News asking John Brennan his thoughts and ideas on what's going on in the intelligence community. He's been discredited. It's time to put that information forward, let the people see it.
This is one of my concerns. And I'm not attacking Cash. I'm not saying he's doing a bad job. I'm just saying that everything was corrupted so bad that the level, in my opinion, of cleansing that needs to happen, I think looking at the polling innately goes above and beyond what we're actually looking at now. And I don't even know what the right answer is. But a lot of people talked about the fact that Trump got elected because of mass deportations or because of like this or that. We asked whether people should be able to see the Epstein files, and it was a big response, like 60 something percent said important. Then we asked about, okay, well, proof about election fraud. That number was way higher. Then we have 94% of people agreeing that we can't have a two-tiered system of justice and that public officials need to be held to the same set of accountability rules as the citizens. And then you have the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago. And then the one that really got me is I was in the Navy. I was a communications officer. We had a major loss of ComSec. It wasn't my fault. It was one of my radio men. But I would have gone to Leavenworth if I had been involved in that, right? And yet Hillary Clinton, like what happens? What happened in September and October, right before the election? And so these are all things that have almost like created this original sin that's going to, in my opinion, hang over. We do not have institutional trust right now. How do we get it back?
I threw some ideas out initially when Cash got there and when Bondi got there. And I'm happy to see Cash kind of following that suit. To mention suits, one of the biggest critiques I had when Cash first got to becoming the director was the selfie on the tarmac, and he's dressed down and they're going to an MMA fight, and then selfies at the MMA fight. And him showing up at certain events, FBI related events, and he's dressed in a polo shirt and slacks and stuff. And I said, you can get more credibility if you actually just look the part and act the part. You don't even have to be that competent if you just look like you know what you're doing. It's what do they say? 50% of doing the job is just showing up. I and some of my friends and some of them, we conveyed that into his circle that every time I would see him out of a suit, I would immediately pepper a message out with an eye roll emoji. You need to look that part. The advice that I gave at the beginning is don't go out and get into this media thing and feed into it and let think that you're some type of celebrity because you finally got this position. You have a responsibility to do the right thing. Let me ask you, you're good at kind of measuring what people think, and while prognosticate what the polling would have been like if Pam Bondi, when she first came in as Attorney General, if she didn't go on Fox News at all, if she didn't sit in front of Sean Hannity and make these weird, outlandish promises of what she's going to give, had she stepped to dealing with the press from a podium, if she came out in her business attire, stood behind a podium, I have some things that I want to disclose to the media, some things that I can tell you, and tell you where we are working on these things, and I'll open up the floor to questions. Had they done that, and I said, if you have big announcements, do those jointly. You and Kash Patel stand behind that podium. What happens, and I can tell you behind the scenes, is when you go before that podium, before you even get there, your Office of Public Affairs, your press people, your briefers, they're all working with you to make sure that you're as well informed and ready for any type of question, the type of questions that are there. You probably practice some of that. When I was a quarter supervisor and a field supervisor, when we went to training, there were times that we were trained on how to get up and speak before people. With her, I said, this is ridiculous. Are you applying to be a contributor at Fox News, or you're the attorney general? Don't go out immediately. Don't answer.
She probably is.
Do it from behind a podium. If she had done that, I don't think that we would have had this faux pas of her overpromising and under-delivering. I think Cash has learned from it. I know Dan Bongino has learned how to do this. The only slip up I saw was, when he was on Fox and Friends that one morning, a little bit too casual there.
That was,
I wasn't a fan of Cash. I wasn't a fan of him going on Joe Rogan. I just don't think that's a good professional look.
He doesn't need to be humanized. He's the director of the FBI. There should be some mystique and professionalism about this guy, right?
How many times did J. Edgar Hoover go on whatever NBC this week? I don't think I've seen any videos of him sitting and answering questions of Ed Brinkley.